What the talk back tonight will be about is about the shows, and I'd like to get your feedback. What you, as you feel things are connecting here with something you're thinking, feel free to chime in. I really want to open the conversation. I've asked Ben and Scott. I'm very thankful for Scott being here. He's doing. That's his son putting in the jungle in the background. That's good. Through communication, there was a miscommunication, and I'm very grateful for Scott being here. He is a longtime friend and has been in several shows. If you've come to see shows here at Skagit Valley College, he was in Richard II and did a wonderful job in that as well. I thought we could do introductions, and so Scott, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
My name is Scott Andrews, and I've worked in the environmental field for quite some time. For the last 18 years, I've been environmental compliance manager for the Swinomish tribe. Before that, for various state and federal agencies and environmental groups such as the Sierra Club. Included in that, and along with a lot of other environmental issues, has been the issue of climate change sort of throughout. I kind of, in the very beginning of being involved in the Sierra Club, helped lead an effort as a volunteer then, before I was paid, to fight a coal-fired power plant in the city of Preston. So just, if any of you know of the Creston coal-fired power plant in eastern Washington, no, because it's not there. We successfully fought it off, and then it was finally killed completely by the Spokane tribe when they got involved a few years later. So fast forward a number of years, and I've been working for, like I said, the Swinomish tribe, and one of the issues I've been involved in is climate change. About a decade ago, the tribe became very interested in what was going to happen to them in climate change. And I was involved in an effort to develop what became touted as the first major environmental or major climate change adaptation plan for a tribe in the United States. And we've gone around to a lot of conferences and things talking about it. It was a sort of a broad brush plan that looked at what are all the impacts that climate change is going to have on the tribe and on the small reservation that they have. In particular, I've been heavily involved in issues of sea level rise because the reservation's an island and the shoreline is very important, but also on issues of fire or wildfire in forests and how that would impact the system as well as people there. So I'd be happy to answer any questions about that or related things.
I kind of came to understanding and motivation on global climate change from a geologic perspective. I'm a geologist by training, and the recognition through studying the Earth's history that the Earth's climate has varied hugely over eons, and that it's possible for the Earth to change to a condition that is very different than what it is now, and that would not be very friendly to the civilization and culture that we have going now. And through that, we kind of got inspired to look at, well, what can we do to address, the fact that we're pushing the climate system out of a condition that is friendly to the way we do business, and really got into looking at the energy side initially. Like, we got to stop burning fossil fuels and do these other things. And one of the early epiphanies for me was that it's not so much, I used to think that, if I drove less or I drove a better car, that would be the solution. And over the years learning that, no, it's really what I put in my mouth that matters. And the things I can do to just eat lower on the hog and waste less food are the most significant things that individuals can do. That has a huge impact. You know, the drumbeat of the impacts of global climate change on the environment and on people and on, you know, our social stability is ongoing. And kind of, you know, the place where I'm at now with this is recognizing that focusing on solutions is really important, because otherwise, you know, it's pretty easy to end up in a state of chocolate-laced despair.
Yeah.
And the thing is that the solutions are out there. We know what we need to do. It's not a mystery. We don't have to wait for, you know, the material scientists to figure out the next great energy resource or battery storage or anything. We have the solutions, and it's just a question of making them happen. And so it really comes down to social attitudes and political will. And that's where I think the sort of thing that we saw tonight is so important, where, you know, all parts of our community are coming together and talking about what the issue is and thinking and bringing their perspectives in, and you know, thinking about what the next step as a community and what the next step as individuals is going to be.
So my question for you is about the show, what you've just seen tonight. Are there places in the plays that you watch that connected for you, that seem to connect to some of the concerns that you have as far as climate change is concerned? Or it doesn't even have to be about climate change. Really, this has to do with culture and ecology.
For me, the one that connected most was the letter from the ocean, and I like the part where it talked about I can't remember. It's like I don't like the words like blog and stuff like that, and like just talking about like how we've turned to like a very like technology based culture, versus when we had to survive off of the land, and because we were surviving off the land, we were respecting the land. And now we don't, like some people don't really even know what nectar is, or how to grow their own food anymore, or anything. And like, we're just so connected on technology that it's not only hurting our environment, because like, I just learned actually from one of my theater classes, those cell phones are mostly, the material is mostly found in Africa and mining in Africa, and that like destroys them over there, which.
Coltan.
Ugh. But anyway, but it's just like, it sucks because like it's hurting our environment, it's hurting our social lives, and like that just like really like, ugh.
Any other thoughts, perspectives that you have about what you saw, some of the images, stories? Yes.
I know we were in it, but watching her, defend, she's a child, she's a 10-year-old little girl.
Mm-hmm.
She's donated every birthday to save the planet. Rather than asking for gifts, she asks people to donate the dollar amount, whatever age she is. She's raised thousands of dollars to help endangered species and things like that. This is a child that like actively cares. She doesn't just care, but she's like doing something about it. In second grade, they had reports, what was it called? Healthy habits. And other kids chose age-appropriate things like hula hooping and basketball. And she chose the planet. So she did this extensive report on recycled cardboard box and talking about palm oil and burning the rainforest. And she put all these pieces of candy, it was right before Halloween, up so that the other kids could recognize the brand names and take that home with them and process this information to their parents and not buy palm oil. And it was like mind-blowing, this child. And so watching her, she's my child, but she's a child. She's our planet's child. She's a child of this earth. And she doesn't deserve this shit. It's like, what have we done to her? This is so wrong. And yes, she cares, but even if they don't care, even if they don't know, they don't deserve it. They haven't done this, and they haven't asked for this. And so watching her defend the trees, it's just, I don't know, it's just like, that was hard for me. I wasn't even in the audience. I was up there like clenching my fist. First of all, like, let go of my child. Go get him, Ben. but with the tree, yeah, it's just, it was heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. I don't sleep at night frequently because I think, what more can I do? Yes, I make donations, and yes, but I can't just say, okay, I made my donation for the year, I'll call it good. I'm not doing everything that I could possibly do, and that's not good enough, you know? And she is, and she's younger than all of us. It's like, so sorry, I'm so sorry. And I think about that all the time. How could I'm not afraid of dying, but I'm afraid of leaving this place to her without having done my best, you know? So that, I don't know, that part spoke to me.
Yeah, part is why I don't want to have kids is because I'm afraid of, if I have a kid, what am I leaving them? What am I putting them into? Like, it's so scary.
Yeah.
I like that the plays, many of them are family-based, so I'm just thinking about a family thing. But I like that it was multiple generations. It seemed like different generations, maybe not in the same family, but of speakers of women of the same gender, or they were couples, or even the ocean spoke together. They were individuals but collective. I thought that's interesting that people are experiencing it on different levels from different ages, right? And seeing more history, but also still having this collective interest or desire.
One of the things, I think, I'm really struck by what you're saying. I mean, you're talking about solutions. I mean, on a local level, on like what we can do ourselves, what are some of those? Eating is one of the things you're talking about.
If you're gonna pick one thing to do, that would be it. I mean, if that's the you know, the relatively easy thing you can do that will have the biggest impact. Yeah.
She is.
I mean, you know, we all know what they are. Like, you know, you can choose to buy green power from PSC, or, you know, you can put solar panels on your house, or you can carpool. I mean, that's a huge one that's not that hard to do, and doesn't take a big investment. Right? And so, you know, and looking larger, you know, there's proposals out there to engage in a set of practices where we can actually reverse the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere and draw down carbon dioxide and methane, primarily chlorofluorocarbons in the atmosphere in a cost-effective way. You know, over the next 30 years, that will pay dividends when we do it. It's not that it's not like it's going to cost us. We're going to make an investment that's going to pay for itself and pay dividends over that amount of time over business as usual.
So it makes sense on a business scale too.
Yes, because you know, I mean, the reality is, if that were not true, then the system we live in, it would, you know, the best solution would not matter. So, short of wholesale revolution.
So I think kind of what I've come to looking at this, and granted, I've been more on the adaptation side. What do you do, assuming we're going to have a certain amount of climate change impacts, and we are, and we're looking more at, it's already happening. And so we've been focused on what those impacts are and how do you do things to sort of adapt your society, adapt what you're doing, you know, on a relatively small scale to that. But also with the idea that adaptation will only go so far, kind of on the path that we're on now. You know, climate change is going way up, so we need to cut greenhouse gases down to, you know, so it's just bad instead of really bad. We can probably adapt to bad, but I'm not sure how we're going to be able to adapt to really bad. So I think there's still hope to be able to bring that curve down by doing some of the things that Ben's talking about, whether that's eating in a way and changing our agricultural system so that it's not as high producing of greenhouse gases. It's using transportation modes that are not as fossil fuel based, and electricity that is from renewable energy. And then the other things that I think he was sort of talking about is how we do land use, whether that's protecting existing forests to the extent possible, managing forests so when you do get wood products from them, they're managed in a way, and this can be done with longer rotations and thinning and various things, that you're preserving a lot of the overall carbon sequestration, getting the carbon into the trees. You know, you're not just leveling off big clear cuts. And then there's a lot of things related to agriculture that can be done very differently to sequester carbon into soil. And many of those are not being done in sort of the standard methods of agriculture that are most typical. But as Ben said, there's no magic here. There's a lot of things that we know how to do. We're just not doing them, either as individuals. But I think there's only, my view is there's only so much that an individual can do kind of within your own life, you know, how you eat, how you drive, etc. What really has to happen is an effort, a political and social effort to change the system that we're in. And in particular, the national system that is sort of going the opposite direction these days from what we need to do.
Sure.
The last play really spoke to me in the not making new things but reusing the things that we have. I'm going into manufacturing to make new things. But I also hoard old things and piles of things that some of it is junk, but a lot of it is things that I reuse in other ways, or I take old things and fix them and reuse them and use tools and parts and other things until there's probably a little bit past when I should stop.
You sound like a low budget theater.
Yeah, it works really well in theater. And I think that's somewhere where we could make a lot of improvement, both from a helping the environment standpoint, but also from a costs less for consumers standpoint in the long run. Instead of a dishwasher that lasts 5 years, you have one that weighs twice as much and is a little bit more awkward to use possibly, but you could, you know, it'll last 100 if you take care of it and you fix it every few years. The things like looking at old tools that are made of chunks of metal that you could throw off a 100-foot building and then pick up and continue using, or current tools where they wear out and break in normal use within a couple of years, is really frustrating to me. That you can't even looking for those things, you can't find the things that last anymore.
That's a little what they're, so in Vanilla Ice Cream, Spanish language play, in Vanilla Ice Cream, the characters, actually what has happened is they've taken the group with Francisco's, and actually the entire group, has taken and broken up the language of Vanilla Ice Cream to share the language. It was a very long diatribe by a single character, and now it's been broken up. But in Vanilla Ice Cream, she's talking about recycling material. And so her job is recycling all this stuff. And she loves her job. She's teaching somebody how to recycle this stuff. But the stuff, this red thing, it goes into this plastic pile, and the pile just keeps getting larger and larger and larger and larger. What do we keep? What are we doing? We continue to consume and consume and consume. It's consume and throw away, consume and throw away, until the piles get so large that you can't do anything with them. And her solution is, she calls radical. She has this radical idea. Here's this person on a recycling line who has this radical idea. What if there are no people? what if we just eliminate people? And no. She says, no. I think it's a very funny part of the play. Matt.
One thing that, and I think this has to do with the piece I was in, but I thought about it outside of that, was like social change with education. I think something that started to happen is that this idea of different subjects as being the sciences and the arts as these different things, I think we reached a time period where it's not as helpful anymore. I'm amazed that in an elementary school, there's no class on love. There's no class on it. There's no course or major in the science and practice of love. Between people, between the environment, us and the environment, because it's really, we're all nature. All of this is nature. So, I mean, for example, I just learned my lines with Carolyn backstage, pretty much. I couldn't play that scene and memorize my lines. It had to be because I love you people. Like, it had to be that was what I had to come out and go, I don't really know what I'm going to do. But I want these people, I care about these people. That's it. And somehow, chemically, in my system, out came the lines. There's a science to this. There's not it's not just a mysterious force. And I feel like, we want to really get into like what makes people want to even talk about this in the first place. Or eat differently, or change things that seem like climbing mountains. It's amazing to me how in schools, something like love is not treated as a subject.
And love comes up several times. The ocean, in the end, the ocean says, I love you.
I love you.
I love you. And the ocean does love us, right? I mean, the ocean's been sucking up our carbon for how long?
Too long.
Too long.
Once the ocean goes, we're done.
Well, bring it closer to home, the Skagit River.
There you go. Yeah, he was probably extremely frustrated by us.
And when, like you were talking about with when you eat, in like I think it's like 10,000 liters of water is put into 1 liter of milk. Isn't it 10,000? But,
Yeah, that sounds about right. To produce a liter of milk, get it to you, yeah.
And I haven't even speak, but at school I just finished the report on, our whole class was doing this, it was assigned, and it was a report on fossil fuels and other changes that we could make. And there were facts in there that I didn't even have a clue about that were simple.
Yeah, having the solutions are there. It's just a matter of the will to do them, right? I mean, having what, and hopefully this is the goal. I mean, the purpose, right? The purpose of doing this kind of drama is to engender will. Do we collectively have the will? I mean, it goes beyond the theater, goes into the entertainment industry. And how can people communicate that are in the entertainment industry, communicate that will and realize the solutions that are already present? And that's the question.
And we have to not go backwards. There are things that we've done in the last 25, 30 years that we've gotten worse about. An example would be recycling. It used to be that you had multiple bins where everybody sorted their own recycling. You sorted into, at that time recycling was mainly it was glass, metals, and glass, metals, papers. Plastic recycling wasn't being done much, but that actually made recycling more efficient. the thing that we do now, where we dump everything into one bin, creates a lot of trash. It's amazing how little of that material can get recycled. A lot of it gets contaminated or doesn't end up getting sorted out. Because when you take that, it goes to a recycling plant, they sort out the things that can be recycled, and everything that's left goes back to the landfill. So if you do the sorting as early as you can in the process, you have the consumer do their own sorting. It's a lot more accurate, it's a lot cheaper, and it's a lot more efficient. And you waste a lot less material putting it back into a landfill at the end. And you don't get things like contamination, so you don't get paper that gets contaminated by water or other liquids that are in your glass bottles or your plastic bottles when you wash them. And if you put them into your recycling wet, your paper gets wet, then the paper sits around until it can get recycled at a paper plant, and it molds. And you can lose an entire bale of paper.
So I'm in student council at school, and basically
Why is that not surprising?
everybody in student council has been up to recycling, and I thought of an idea of bringing in a bag, and a reusable bag, and because we only recycle paper at our school, and cardboard sometimes, but I thought bringing in a reusable bag from home, and when people need to recycle glass, foil, they just put it in that bag. We don't even have recycling bins outside or anything.
But the key is how does it go? You're not going to be at that school forever.
Yeah.
How does it go beyond you? How does it go? How does that same idea pass? So systems have to be created, right? Systems, you have to work with the people that are in charge to create systems to be able to get that to happen.
Yeah, and my our student council, like the adult who runs it all, she was like, if you guys want to do this, you need to work with this. Don't just leave it up to everybody else. You need to actually, because she there's this like chocolate bar thing where you can come in the morning and buy chocolate bars when the student council did that. Nobody came. She was the only one who did it. And she's like, if you guys do this, you need to actually be part of it. You can't just give up.
Right. That's a good point. But creating, you know what I mean? Like how do you, and one of the things, and I think this goes back to Ben's point about we have all the solutions. They're in the world. We know what they are. There are books written on it. Paul Hawkins wrote an incredible book that has every single solution to all the problems. And the most important thing is he's defined what the barriers are to that solution. What stops us from going any further? And so there must be some kind of barrier that stops the people in charge from doing what you're doing right now, right?
She spent her 10th birthday at the city council meeting asking them to ban single-use plastic bags. So she spent her birthday this year. And so she knows. But
Right.
why are they sitting up there going, should we? Yeah. We should. What is holding them back? Absolutely we should. I was thinking
Because somebody might not vote for them,
Right,
who really likes that plastic bag.
Right.
I use it in my garbage can.
I'm really
You
attached to
put
that
a plastic
bag,
your
actually.
garbage in it, and then you wrap it in another plastic bag, and then another plastic bag, and then throw it into a plastic bag, and then landfill.
Yep.
Yeah, I work at a preschool, and that's what they do. They grab this plastic bag with like 3 paper towels in it, put it inside this plastic bag, and another plastic, and it's like plastic upon plastic. And so every time I close, I'm like, no, I'll get the trash, pour it into one plastic bag, and then I empty that plastic bag and go put it back in the trash bin. Why can't you do that? Why can't you empty?
You might touch trash. I mean,
But
sadly, you know.
there is an actual are some things you shouldn't, that is unsafe, that are unsafely touched. There actually are good reasons to have special needs schools.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's not like an all or nothing thing, and it's, so I think that's
What
one of
makes
the
it hard.
That's one of the hard things.
I think a really important point to make, and it's one that I've used in classes here. I've got to teach an energy and economics learning community with Matt Scammell, and right now I'm teaching environmental science and economics with him in our applied management program. And one of the key concepts that crosses the line between economics and environmental science is what's referred to as externalities, where the cost of something is not included in the price. The cost is external to the price. So for example, when you go to the gas station and you buy gas for $3 a gallon, you're paying a small fraction of the cost of that gallon of gas. Because, I mean, the production costs and the exploration costs and the refining costs and the transportation costs are all in there because those hit the bottom line of the petroleum companies. But the cost of sea level rise and ocean acidification and climate change and extreme weather, et cetera, are not included in the cost of the gasoline until we get those prices internalized, and it doesn't cost like 0.5 cents to have a big plastic bag, then we're not going to be careful with them. And so we have to work to get those costs internalized. And that's where the idea of something like putting a price on carbon comes in. You know, when we had a big debate in that class today about, well, should we put a price on carbon or should we take subsidies away from fossil fuels, right? And which is a better way to try to make that happen? And so as long as business as usual is cheap, we're going to continue to do business as usual. And as soon as we have to start paying full price for some of these things that are incredibly underpriced right now, we're not going to be careful with it, right? We're gonna not carpool, and we're gonna drive a car that's designed for power instead of efficiency, which most of our vehicles are. We're gonna put a plastic bag in a plastic bag in a plastic bag, because plastic bags cost 0.5 cents instead of $1 each, like they should. And so, you know, one of my favorite things that Matt says in class all the time is, if you get the price right, everything will happen, right? And so getting the price right is important, and you know, that comes down to us telling our representatives, like the city council, et cetera, that, you know, and on up, that, you know, they need to work on not subsidizing extractive industries that are damaging to the environment, and not allowing those externalities to continue.
What I did with the plastic bags, because I finally promised myself, because you can get nice, you know, reusable bags, right? And my problem was I would always forget to bring them, right? I had them at home, they didn't make it to my car, I'd forget to bring it. So what I finally did was, I said, whatever, if I forget to bring them, well then I'll just buy more of those. So every time I went to Fred Meyer and forgot to bring my reusable bags, I would buy a reusable bag and not ever reuse them. So now I have so many reusable bags that I never forget them, and I have them everywhere.
I do that all the time too, and I just put it back in my cart, and then I bring my cart to the car, and I unload my cart, and then when I get home, I go get my reusable bags, and I load it up, and I bring it in the house. It's a solution. It's not, I mean, yeah, I forget things, but
I love, you know, I love the reusable bags. It's just like, now I have enough, and I don't ever forget them anymore, because they're everywhere.
One of the things, I wrote just a couple impressions, and you know, both of them were about the social aspects of finding climate solutions, and you know, so one thing I was thinking about was the logger, and you know, he's just going to work and trying to feed his family, right? And to say you shouldn't do your job is a hard thing for people to hear, and so how do we deal with that? How do we deal with that aspect of the fact that we have an economy that is extractive, and many of our jobs are based on you know, resource extraction, perhaps misguided, poor, inefficient, whatever. Another aspect of it is you know, the social aspect of getting people to accept change, right? Because we're really talking about drastically changing how we do stuff, like seriously changing the way that we do stuff, and that's scary, right? And so how do we deal with the fact that, you know, if I'm pushing you to somewhere you don't want to be, what are you going to do? You're going to push back, right? And so how do we deal with that? Because the social engineering aspect of getting to a sustainable economy, a sustainable culture, is going to be as challenging as the engineering and technological component of getting to a sustainable society.
I think a good example there is in forestry. You're sort of bringing up the logger thing, and you know, I mean, typically in the U.S., particularly in the western United States and in larger forests, we do big clear cuts because it's cheap and efficient in one sense of the word. They can get a lot of timber out easily, all in one place. It doesn't take that many people.
Costs less.
Yeah, it's cheap.
That's the only thing that matters. It costs less.
It costs less, right?
Per tree.
So, but there are other systems which take more labor per tree and are probably a little more expensive, but in the long run, in a climate change scenario, are a lot better. If you thin, so you've got a bunch of trees in a forest that are, you know, fairly small, right? And if instead of clear cutting a chunk of forest, if you take some of the trees, so you're thinning out the trees, that gives the remaining trees more room to grow faster. They're putting more carbon into them, right? And so if that sort of a system is done right, you can end up having more carbon sequestration than you do in a system where you're periodically going and clear cutting forests and things.
And doesn't that sort of forestry help with these raging fires that we have because it's
there are also aspects of, well, and if you combine that, it depends a lot on the habitat. It can get pretty complex, what habitat and how dry and all that sort of thing. But you know, if you're combining thinning with brush control and things like that, so you don't have fire getting up into the trees as easily or between trees. Frankly, if you get a really, really big fire like some of the ones going on in California, it's not going to matter. It'll hold down the number and frequency of some of the smaller fires that come through and get up into the trees. But the really, really big ones, once they're going, there's not really much you can do, and even a properly managed forest is going to go. So that gets complicated.
Well, one thing to recognize about the biosphere and carbon is that if you look at, you know, like they've been keeping track of how much carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere at the top of Mauna Loa since like 1960. And they go out like every week or every month or something and measure how much carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere, and they record it. And you know, on the average, it's been going up, right? But if you look at it annually, it goes up in the fall and winter, and then back down in the spring and summer, despite the fact that we're burning fossil carbon as fast as we can to get out of the ground. So the biosphere has the capability to take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and actually cause carbon dioxide in the atmosphere to go down when plants start growing in the spring and trees put on their leaves and put on a new layer of tree stuff, cambium, or I'm a geologist, but you know, more wood, right? They're sequestering carbon and fixing it from the atmosphere. One of the messages we heard today was, you know, let's let the earth will heal itself if we let it. If we work with those biological systems, you know, with soil carbon, reforestation, intercropping, silvopasture, like growing trees and crops together, and all different, there's a whole bunch of different things that we could do. That biosphere system will reverse the carbon dioxide that we're putting out there, right? I mean, we have to also not do as much fossil fuels, but if we work with those biological systems, they're powerful and huge, and they have the capability to draw down that atmospheric carbon, which is what we need to have happen in short order, right? So,
Matt, you had a comment?
I saw your hand.
That's okay. Okay. Kind of on like both of those notes, I just want to know if you have any ideas about conflict palm oil? Because I read the ingredients, and if it says palm oil, they don't say conflict palm oil is sustainable on the back of the ingredients, they don't want you to know. I'll call the company and I will ask. I won't do it right then, I'll put the product back and I'll make a note, and then I will call like Trader Joe's. There's no reason, maybe besides like you have a 7-year contract with a company, that you should have palm oil in yours. You're like a small, you're not Safeway, you're not carrying Cheetos and all that stuff. You have your own brand. So I called Trader Joe's and I asked, is it conflict or is it sustainable? And she goes, which thing are you talking about? I was like, okay, so you have your both. She's like, well, I mean, we're working on not having it, sort of someday maybe. And I was like, one of those like, okay. But I thought, besides like telling everybody that I know to call Trader Joe's and say, next time your contracts come up, don't do this. And then be that store that's like, we don't do this. And all the people that care will shop there more, and all the people that don't care still won't care. But you can take a stand, and you'll have more business because of it. But you'll also be doing the environment a huge favor, because you were saying, of course, cutting it all down, it's like raping the environment all at once. When you take little pieces, when you burn an entire rainforest down, it's a carbon bomb that goes off. And that's all at once. And the earth, like you're saying, does this on its own, but it can't really recover because you've not only released all that carbon, you have no trees to suck it back in. You've eliminated them and you've burned all the animals inside too. So
particularly in Southeast Asia, there is a huge amount of conversion of native forests to palm oil going on. And just like there is in Brazil, in that area, there's a huge amount of conversion of Amazonian rainforest going mostly to cattle, similar agriculture, but mostly to cattle. And that's actually being currently encouraged by the Trump-like current president down there.
Yeah, and it's because it's cheap.
I'm so happy that that's the first time 45 has been mentioned.
Sorry.
This gives me joy. It just gives me joy. You had to do it, Scott.
So I don't know if you guys have any ideas of, because you were saying take here and there, and do you have any other ideas about palm oil, how to do that better? Besides
Well, one thing about dealing with these sort of issues is you have to pace yourself and you have to choose your battles, and you can't try to fix all facets of it. And so my solution with palm oil is I don't buy palm oil and I don't eat palm oil, but I don't put out there and make that one of the issues that I address, right? I work more on energy aspects and sustainable food systems in the larger sense. And so I think, one of the things to recognize is that if you are woke on issues of climate change,
I'm so woke.
you really have to engage in self-care. You have to take care of yourself, because you could become rapidly overwhelmed and in a state of despair. And chocolate is also a tropical product that you eat a lot of. That's not very sustainable. Right? So you got to take care of yourself, and I think pacing yourself and choosing your battles and not being overwhelmed by all aspects of it, and saying, I want to work on this, and I'm going to work on this, and letting some of the rest of it go is important. Sorry, I missed your comment. What did you say?
Oh, that cacao and chocolate, depending on where you're purchasing it from around the world, at least in Central America, a lot of it is produced in agroforestry systems.
Yes.
And actually is helping, rather than like clearing it for cattle.
Sure, you bet.
If there is a market for it, it keeps those farmers in business.
So choosing the right chocolate.
Choosing the right chocolate. But if you're buying it from like monocrop in a lot of like West Africa, then there is a lot of deforestation that takes place.
Sometimes the right chocolate, the good
Yeah.
chocolate is the chocolate that's within arm's reach.
Yes, this is true. And I also just have to say that whenever anybody talks about cacao, I spent 2 years where my daily commute was about a 200-yard walk from my house to the office through a cacao orchard, so in Fiji. But so yes, that always brings back nice memories.
Well, I think we're close.
I was just gonna sort of a wrap-up thing, like in the scene that the last show, what I don't even know what it was called, what was it? Breathing Spoons. Okay, that Matt and Carolyn did. It reminded me
Thank
of,
you so much.
Thanks a lot.
and thinking about the generations, my grandparents, born in the late 80s, late 1880s, I'm sorry, another century back, and they lived a simple life. You know, I was reflecting with Scott the other day. I said, you know, we get busy and we do the expedient, quick thing. We grab another plastic bag because it's simple. But that's not how they lived. They were farmers. They grew their own food. Their animals that they grew or what they ate. And it was just a simpler, slower pace. And they weren't about consumerism. That was not what drove my grandparents. That's not what they lived their life for. And it wasn't the next paycheck to get the next bigger car, to get the next, bigger house. They were simple people. And somehow we need to get back to those values of being simple people. That we don't need, all of this stuff.
We don't distinguish between self-involvement and self-care.
Yeah.
Right? You're talking about how are you going to manage this without self-care? Here you have this YouTube alone, just by itself, one website. You can get a whole education on self-care and radically change your mental state and many other things about yourself. You can also do absolutely zero to better yourself with the same amount of time on that one website. Self-care is going to have an effect on the environment, because if people don't know how to take care of themselves and learn, and we've given the capacities to learn about, like, you want to study to be a physician? You can learn how to be a physician. I mean, it's not the same as going to school. I'm not going to say that.
I'm not going to go to your office.
We're going to have all this power and be handed all this stuff, and we need to use it. It's not using it, it's saying, oh, somebody else knows that. But we're being handed everything to use. But if it's just about fun kitten videos, and that's it, then it's like we're not using what we're being given. How are we going to manage these massive issues we've created without redefining self-care?
Last word. Last word.
Well, I relate to what you said. You don't need all this stuff. I used to live in California. We had all these toys. We barely ever played with them.
Have you seen the story of Stuff? Oh, look it up. Story of Stuff. It's a wonderful video. And it is exactly what you're talking about. It's exactly what Matt's talking about too.
And
All right.
if you're not aware of it, Damon mentioned it, but the Paul Hawken book actually was a lot of work by a lot of people analyzing climate solutions. And they picked the top 80 existing climate solutions, and then another 20 that are coming online. And it's called Project Drawdown. The idea that we will draw down the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere and actually reverse climate change. If we implement these between now and 2050, and then they look at how much would it cost to do it, what would be the payback on it, and how much carbon dioxide equivalent would it remove from the atmosphere. And there's all kinds of cool stuff that we talked about tonight that's in there. Plant-rich diet, intercropping trees and crops, et cetera, wind power, you name it. The top one is educating women and girls and giving them access to family planning. And this is a global level project. It's not just the U.S. And so again, we're back to social issues, and that's a social issue. Is educating women and girls so that they have economic clout essentially. They have economic wheels that they can engage in doing what they want to do to take care of themselves and feed their kids, and then have control over how many kids they have. And that was, you know, those two things actually separated it out, but they say in their analysis it's impossible to really separate those, and together they're by far the largest thing we can do to have an impact on climate. So.
With Cal's birth, there's methane, and they, somebody in Yale, there was like this report, that if you give cows 2% of their diet, this certain type of acidity, it'll stop.
Their birthing?
Yeah.
That's in that Project Drawdown book too. It's the little article's titled, "A Cow Walked Onto a Beach."
All right, thank you so much, folks.
Thank you.